with what for many people might be your last session of an amazing couple of days. My name is Jeannie Burgo. I'm the president of Internews, and I'm very happy to be facilitating our panel on uncovering environmental crimes in tropical ecosystems, investigative journalism, and the press freedom in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I think we've heard all week that journalism is an incredibly dangerous profession. And we've heard all week that environmental journalism is one of the most dangerous forms of journalism to practice. And I think extractive industries and reporting on extractive industries, like in places such as the tropical forests, might be the most dangerous of all. And we know it's an incredibly important body of work. And we want to talk today about both the trends that we're seeing in regions around the world, as well as sort of some of the ways we're able to continue reporting in these very sensitive areas and really sort of to protect our shared and vital tropical infrastructure. So very happy to have our panels today. I'm going to go, we have Isabel Schleifer, who's our research manager at Internews, who is about to publish a research project called Covering the Planet, which is really looking very broadly at trends in environmental journalism over the last couple of years. We have Sam, sorry Sam, your last name just suddenly slipped me for a minute, Shramsky, sorry, who is our representative from the Earth Journalism Network. It's a project of Internews, and he is one of our special projects editor for the Earth Journalism Network. We have our colleague Sigrid Vasconez, who is the project manager. She's an Internews project manager for a USAID-funded project called Together for Conservation. It's in partnership with the Wildlife Conservation Society and USAID funding. We're super happy. We're really happy that Gustavo joined in from the Pulitzer Center, and which is part of where the Rainforest Investigations Network is sitting. And so we're really thank you for the last minute of stepping in as our final panelist on our final panel. So I'm not going to say very much. We have a very sharp drop at 7. So I would like to just sort of do a round robin of sort of the trends that you're seeing and sort of both this type of reporting and sort of what's happening when it comes to crimes in tropical ecosystems, but also then a little bit about the trends in reporting as well. So Isabel, since you're bringing such a global perspective on that, why don't we have you start and then we'll sort of go down regionally.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming at this late time of the day. Understanding how journalists around the world report on climate change and the environment is crucial. So we can learn how to support them better so they can report more and safer. However, to date there has been no study on a truly global scale clarifying the challenges and enablers. There are case studies, but often they focus on high-income countries or is literature done by academics. And Covering the Planet is a novel global benchmark of the current state of climate and environmental journalism done in collaboration between Internews and Deakin University. The research is unique in focusing on low and middle income countries and let journalists speak. The research team surveyed 744 journalists in 102 countries about the way they do their climate and environmental reporting, what they need to do it better. The researchers also interviewed 74 journalists in 43 countries, so it's a really, it's a great sample to take lessons from, and issues covered in the report are threats and safety issues, the role of disinformation, and what the needs are, and I will complement their insights with some findings over the next hour.
Sam, I know you focus on Southeast Asia. I know you have a lot of experience there, but we'd love to hear about the trends there as well, Sam. So if you could.
Yeah. So my work with Earth Journalism Network in Asia has been carried out the last probably 3+ years, and in general, we think of Asia as the Asia Pacific at Internews, right? That's kind of our conceptualization. So it extends from Western Asia all the way to the Pacific region. And in terms of geographical extent, that's the majority of the planet and surface area. In terms of population, it's the majority of the world's human population. And in terms of sort of human environmental interactions, and we're talking about tropical ecosystems, whether it's Southeast Asia or the wider Asia Pacific region, we're also talking about a history of basically human impacts on the environment that go back 15,000 years. So, this is a region of extensive complexity with huge implications, historical implications, and a lot of present and current topical issues for environmental and climate coverage. Our primary work at EJN historically started out in Southeast Asia because our founder was a journalist in Thailand for many years, and so his initial networks branched out in the region. And so, we've noticed over the past 20 years in EJN's, since its inception, that some of the issues that we see in Asia have been reflected in other regions, but we have a very deep understanding of the evolution of environmental journalism and the conditions that environmental journalists face. And one of the things that hopefully I'll talk about a little bit more if we have an opportunity is the collaborative work that we've been doing across the region, and particularly in South and Southeast Asia. But writ large, what I can basically say is that a lot of the conditions that we've been talking about, the threats and in some cases the opportunities that we've been talking about at this conference over the last 3 years, I think are heavily magnified in the region, and to some degree have been present for a number of years and undercovered, underreported. So, like I said, I'll hopefully talk a little bit about collaborations and how we use that as a tool to reach some of these issues. But that's sort of encapsulated what I would say.
Great, and we really do look forward to talking about that. I think collaboration is such a powerful tool. Sigrid, you're really, your project is focused on reporting wildlife crime in the Amazon. What do you want to tell us again, some of the overview and trends that you're...
Thanks, yeah. Well, if I transport you to the Amazon, as we probably all know, the Amazon is in peril, and it's reaching, according to scientists, it's reaching its tipping point because 20% of deforestation already. And so on top of that, what we're looking through the project that we're executing with Wildlife Conservation Society is that we have environmental crimes that are linked to transnational crime organizations. So we're looking at increasing illegal mining, wildlife trafficking, illegal and underreported and unregulated fishing, and all sorts of crimes that make it even more complex, the scenario where journalists are reporting. And as Isabel mentioned, the Covering the Planet report that is almost to be launched, we are seeing that most of the journalists or environmental journalists in the region, they lack the resources to do their reporting, but furthermore, they're also lacking, or they're being threatened, and they have more risks to report these environmental crimes that are linked to these criminal, transnational criminal organizations. Just to give you a figure, last year we, Infamazonia, which is a partner of Internews also in the region, developed a report that's called Amazon Underworld, and they discovered that from 348 municipalities that are at the border of the Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia, 242 municipalities, which is over 95%, have already penetration of criminal organizations. So when you think about this issue and you think about journalists trying to bring out the complex environmental climate and impunity that goes there with environmental destruction, well, it's a dire situation. So in the next round, I will be telling you what we are trying to do through the project that works in the Amazon. No?
Great, thank you. And Carla, very happy to have you with Pulitzer Center's Rainforest Investigations Network. And I know that you focus a lot on the Congo, but also have experience in Brazil. So we'd love to hear sort of, again, some of the trends you're seeing when it comes to environmental crime. Then we'll jump into the solutions in our questions.
Thank you. Sorry for a bit late. Lots of things happening.
something with other microphone?
Hello? Yeah? Can you hear me?
You just have to speak loud.
No? Yeah, okay.
There we go.
So yeah, I'm sorry for being a little bit late. Lots of things going on at the same time here at this conference. But actually, I have a presentation to show you about a work that was not made by me, but a colleague from the Rainforest Investigations Network. And then I'd like to show you, because I do a lot of work in Latin America, and then I will show how all these regions have this dialogue, but I will show her work that had a really great impact at the Congo Basin. Actually, two journalists from our network work together.
Super.
Do you have the presentation? Because I sent a presentation.
I'm not sure who has presentation here? No?
I sent the presentation. So like,
Okay, but you can explain it maybe, just go through that.
I'd rather have the presentation because, like, again, it's not made by me. The presentation is there, all the important details that I forwarded there. So, like,
I'm not sure, from an organizer's, I'm not sure where the presentation ended up, sorry. I didn't,
and you confirmed
There.
to me that you received. No, it's just because, like, you know, if I was talking about the Amazon, I could just talk without anything. But
well, why don't we focus on, that would be fine too. I'm sorry, I don't know where the presentation went. It's, sorry.
I don't know because I can't talk without the presentation. We really.
Okay, so should we go to just focus on some questions, or, I'm very sorry, everyone, I'm not sure where it was sent.
I sent the presentation, it was confirmed, that was well received, so like, I don't know what's going on.
I'm sort of looking around, I'm not even,
Well, I'll
yeah.
try, and if needed, Gustavo, please help me, because like,
Yeah.
it's, yes, I have it on the email, yeah. But I don't have Wi-Fi.
While they're getting that, maybe we'll just start some questions, and I'm very sorry, I just don't know where it even is, and,
Yeah, maybe we should just move,
Yep.
move on. Because our time is limited.
yep.
Yeah.
Sam, we'll just keep talking, and when you find it, we'll come back to that, would be great. You were talking about collaborative journalism, maybe we could just jump right into that, that would be great, to hear a little bit more about how that's worked for you.
Yeah, so as mentioned, you know, the Asia-Pacific region is massive. Geographically, it's the largest extent surface area of the planet. And again, population numbers, it's the majority of the human population. So in covering stories of interest to the region, or at least attempting to cover stories about Asia, it's, I think, an imperative to take a collaborative approach. And what we do at EJN in recent years is to follow a model of cross-border collaboration that in some senses is not quite as, I guess you could say, iconic or well-known as the OCCRP approach or the ICIJ approach, in that there's a leak or there's a specific set of documents that a number of outlets and journalists take on as a means of, you know, covering an issue with cross-border transnational implications. What our approach is, as I would say, to some degree, is kind of a more egalitarian approach, in that we, in following in sort of best practices of collaborative journalism, we go to outlets and we go to freelancers and we say, what's possible? How can you, well, given an issue, so for instance, we've explored fossil fuel investment, primarily in Southeast Asia, meat consumption and production using this lens of One Health, And then ultimately, last year we also took on greenwashing. This year we're going to be exploring soils issues. And so we have a theme, and then we basically convene meetings with partners, with outlets and freelancers, and in some cases individual staff journalists, and we say, how would it be possible for all of you to work together on this theme? And we have essentially a menu that we go through that basically stipulates any number of ways of collaboration. So they can be things like peer review of drafts, working together on shared data sources, access to human sources, because as we know, in journalism is highly competitive, and oftentimes people don't share their sources, right? So we find the range of different sort of, I guess you could say, options within this menu framework. And then from there, we build the collaborative sort of iteratively over the course of several months. And as a result of doing that, we feel like we've been able to tackle really complex issues that are pertinent to individual audiences in countries that maybe actually share borders or regionally close, but are quite different culturally, even ecologically, and if we're talking about tropical ecosystems. And we have found, and both in the reaction from the journalists with whom we work, as well as audience engagement, that this has been something that's quite innovative and frankly fulfilling to the partners that, with whom we're working. So it's not together. I wouldn't say that we invented this model, but it's something that we've found adapted to the context of the Asia Pacific region, and particularly in Southeast Asia, is extremely. It works quite well, and it's been quite gratifying. So.
Great. Well, thank you for that description. And now I am very delighted that the presentation is here. I might ask my colleagues if it's, maybe we can move a little bit out of the way while this, the chair is a bit, okay. All right.
Well, I'm glad it worked. So here it is. It's a very powerful investigation made through the Rainforest Investigations Network, where I'm a fellow and Gustavo is the Director of Investigations. And Lutz Center really pushed us to collaborate, and this is a very successful case where it was published by Le Monde and Info Congo. So, and then here we are highlighting the networks, the power of working in a collaborative investigation. So in this case, there were two fellows, Josiane Quagga, apologies if I'm not pronouncing it correct, to them, and Madeleine Guébois. And then both of them had the projects focused on illegal logging. They had two different proposals for the network, and then on the course of the fellowship, they started working together. And then they ended up doing this work that was published. Sorry. So here shows you the region where they worked on. And of course, that collaborations, we have a lot of advantages, but there are challenges, especially when you are, well, beyond the individual itself. Each of us has our own specifics to work, but at the same time, the outlets, in this case, it involved two different outlets. There is a style, maybe the length of a publication, but then they worked really well to define the role of each of them and how the publication process would be made. And then, of course, that time management, communication, but it's a really good learning process, and this case is very successful. And they benefit a lot for sharing, because when you have more people, more brains work together, you get the best of each of them, and then the strength of each of them, because we can't do everything by ourselves. So that's really the magic of these collaborations. And of course, that we also have at the RIN, there is a great team that support us, data analysts, data editor, research editors, really are very supportive. And through this network, we have access to databases and a lot of tools that if you'd need to pay a lot of money to have access to. And then as as part of this network, we have this benefit. And then in this case here, for example, from their investigations is in French, a database where they scrape the data, because data is very powerful, but several times the data is not in the format you want to be searchable, to be in a spreadsheet. You find a lot of images and PDFs, and there is a hard work to gather information in a way that you can put in a spreadsheet, and from there set up maps and have like ranks of these informations. And here we have like a picture of the ground, and then they hit this cartoon for her work. And talking with sources, like it's really powerful when you have more people. As you know, sometimes it's not easy to get sometimes an interview. So when you have more people working with you, because you have to keep pushing and try and follow up with them. So it's really important. And so the main project was about these illegal logging cases there in Cameroon, and the outcome were 7 collaborative investigations that they published in Le Monde and IFO Congo. And it has a lot of impact. So they were republished by local and international outlets. They also did a podcast. And 5 days after the publication, the country's ministry gave a response to their investigation. And of course, they also faced challenges being a woman. Being a woman doing investigative reporting and environmental reporting is more challenging than being a man, as you know. And then like they received the messages like, are you crazy to doing this? You shouldn't investigate this. But then even during a radio show they were talking, there were some comments telling them to stop, and they didn't stop. And I can tell you as a woman, for many people in my family, they don't really understand what I do. They say, are you crazy? Stop doing it. It's dangerous. But as you know, when we have a mission, we keep going. We have to be cautious and do risk assessment, but you can't stop, and you have to break this ground to not be just dominated by men. So, and here are them, our stars. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple of follow-up questions exactly on those lines? I mean, I think the power of collaboration is one of the safety mechanisms. So just curious, like, for the women to work together on it, does that help a little bit? I know that it is incredibly dangerous and you get a lot of harassment, but perhaps collaboration is one tool for, I don't know, some sort of protection, maybe.
Yeah, no, collaboration is, in this case, of course, if you have someone else with you, it's less dangerous than being alone. But of course, at the Pulitzer Center, we have a very strict risk assessment before going on the ground. And like, we can't go without it. So we have to put emergency contacts, a secret word or phrase in case you're kidnapped, to be sure that you are you, that the people that get you is you. And also the outlet must be accountable to follow you when you are on the ground. So they used like satellite communicator trackers. That's one thing that I used for the first time in my last trip to the Amazon for my RIN project. Because the first time I used it, I said, I won't go. Because as all you know, after the murders, the tragedy and murders of Don and Bruno, we all increased the level of risk assessment before going on the ground. And then I said, I won't go, and thanks, of course, it costs money, but thanks for the fellowship, I bought the equipment, so you pay a monthly, you can pay the month and cancel it and just use when you need. And I checked in 3 times a day with my editors, with Gustavo. You can set up pre-written messages and then just press send and you get your location. There's also an option if you're going somewhere that's riskier, the live location. So as you move, they can know where you are. And it is really important to build maps and to use those coordinates to uncover the environmental crimes you're investigating.
I mean, I think you just described very viscerally for us about the dangers of the fact that you have to go to those, those extremes, and yes, exactly. And actually, Sigrid, you referred to that as well, that you're sort of seeing there's some protections and safeguards. Sort of what are some of the tactics that you've taken?
Well, for the case that we are working with in Together for Conservation in the project, we have, first we are supporting through story grants to journalists. We have had almost 80 journalists that we have supported, emerging environmental journalists in the Amazon. And we ask them to provide risk assessments, and then we provide them with mentoring, individual mentoring, to develop or to really reflect on the risks before they go to do the story. And sometimes that means that they will change the angle of the story or the site of the story. And then we are developing also protocols, a quite similar way that Carla has described. And we are also doing, this is because this is a transboundary network that we were building. No? We are working with journalists from Ecuador, from Peru, from Colombia, and Brazil. And so we gather them also to discuss the issues together. And so they are building a community, to learning and exchange community from where they can also support each other to get sources that are more, less threatening sources, or sources where they're to diminish their threats. That would be the idea. Or to be able to report collaboratively. We also, just as following up what Sam just mentioned and also that Carla mentioned, we are supporting collaborative journalism, and we just launched well, not we, but our partner Ojo Público, which is a media outlet in Peru, developed a very interesting and in-depth investigation about illegal mining that's called Dirty Gold. And by working with media outlets in the 5 countries, because this research also included Bolivia, they were able to share sources and also resources on how to get to the investigation in a more safe manner.
I want to, we have, as we said, sort of very little time because we have to get out promptly at 7, but so I'll turn to the audience if there's any questions after I turn to Isabel for we've heard some really specific tactics that journalists reporting, particularly in tropical environments, have been using, particularly in the extractive industries, the most dangerous of all. In your reporting and your research, what are some of the safety and security trends that you're seeing pulling back to that global level of the research that you've done?
Yeah, thank you, Jeannie. I mean, environmental journalism is dangerous, and that covering the planet research confirms that on a global scale as well. The top 5 themes journalists reported on were deforestation, water and sanitation, water pollution, government policy, and plastic pollution. And you can imagine that reporting on those themes often includes reporting on actions that are carried out illegally, and that in itself is dangerous. And journalists in many countries are threatened because of their work that they do, also because it's often carried out in remote areas that causes even more dangers for females reporters who do that work. 39% of journalists say they are sometimes or frequently threatened. And most journalists said that the threats occurred after a story was published, with 56%, and nearly 45% said they were threatened when they were reporting on the story. And threats that they are facing includes verbal threats, online threats and harassment, physical violence, and nearly a third of the journalists said that they experienced legal threats. And interestingly, they said 43% said the threats come mainly from those pursuing illegal activities in relation to the environment. And as a consequence, and I think that's the worrying part, is that 39% of journalists said that they have self-censored when covering climate change and environment. And they say that those undertaking illegal activities, as well as government, were the top two causes of their feeling that they need to self-censor.
I'd love to talk a little bit more from everybody about that self-censorship issue, and even thinking about some of the mis and disinformation or the chaos that they're facing. But first, before we go into some of those, is there any questions from the audience, just to make this a little bit more participatory? If anybody has comments or questions or experiences to share in this type of reporting so dangerous in such a dangerous places. I'll come back to y'all. Oh, yes, excuse me.
Claro.
Yeah.
Esta mañana,
This morning we were talking more about these researches, and we did a collaborative work with media in Denmark and Colombia and Sweden about the biggest mining company in the world. And the biggest thermoelectric plant in Denmark is no longer buying Colombian coal. Okay, pretty, it's very heroic. We have a lot of problems. But after that, what happens? After this, the business is not modified regardless of the risks that we are facing. That is something that worries me while I listen what you're saying. What should be our mission in this stressful situation that we know it's unfair? But we don't create an effect in a significant way. And the second aspect has to be with a psychosocial aspect. We're facing situations that not only because of aggressions affect us, but because of the situations of our funds. There are people who are facing a lot of aggression, and that also affects us and affects the possibility of our creative work, the capacity that we have to develop in a medium term. Last year we finished this research, and a lot of us end up really ill and we're really anxious and depressed. That now are an essential part of everyone in the world after COVID, but that are affecting now journalists in a very specific way. So we have two types of risks. One related to aggressions and the other one related to the situations that we face. And regarding the first word, what is the risk that we're facing, like, especially for an independent journalism? What do we need to do for it to be worth it? Because we're facing a big situation. And the second thing is, how do we work together with all of these coalitions? Because these we are facing disappearing.
I'm going to try to interpret and sum up a little bit of what he said. Okay, so first of all, I think there's a big discussion around the role of journalism in calling to action and what happens after the reports, like you mentioned. No? When you report on an environmental crime or an environmental disaster, what's the role to play? No, if that's something I understood. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, and I think in the report covering the planet, we found out that environmental journalists have a plural view on what to do. No, some more classic view of journalism is saying, okay, we should not be the ones that continue, no? But other ones are saying that given the dire situation of the planet, we need to engage. So I don't know if I can resolve the question, but I think it's an ongoing discussion. And I am, for example, I'm not a journalist. I'm more in the conservation side. So I would say yes. I think there's a need to do it. But in that sense, I also think it's important to understand the risk behind having a position, or having an advocacy position, in terms of how to call the action, because it's the communities, it's the population that's there that need to be engaged mostly, And the last part of the discussion you mentioned is about integral or holistic well-being of journalists. And when you do develop these stories, sometimes you become very, we're talking about climate anxiety or eco-anxiety in general. And what we are looking at Internews is we're trying to focus or address this in a holistic manner. Journalists and, well, everybody, we're experiencing that. And so it's not only physical threats, but we've discussed throughout this week also about mental health. And it's very important to that. I'm trying to kind of answer in some of your questions. I don't know if I did.
Carla, I would love to hear your
Yeah.
perspective on that, particularly the first half.
I can add some, and I hear you because I've been there several times. We really need to shed a light on the need to take care of mental health because we deal with really tough topics, and I can't count many nights that I couldn't sleep well because of things that I reported. But I think the good news is that, at least from Olga Bay where I work and the Pulitzer Center, we are receiving more support. I can tell you that when I started environmental report in 2017, and I had really issues with the story I was doing, and I reported to the newsroom at the time, I didn't have the support I expected. I was crying and all that, and now, and I cover a lot of attacks against indigenous leaders in Brazil. 2 sources have been killed that I interviewed. One is Bruno Pereira, the other one is Paulo Guajajara, and then 3 months after Bruno and Don, and I knew Dom as well, and then 3 months after, an indigenous leader, a Tembé indigenous leader I interviewed, who was the source of a palm oil investigation, was shot in the head in the same road where some motorbikes chased our reporting team at the time. So like, at that moment, I remember that then I posted from Olga Bay in Asana, that's the platform we use, and the CEO immediately said, Carla, do you need to take some days off to decompress? And then I thanked, and I said, I need to follow this case. I can't disconnect it. He was my source, and I was in contact with his family, but and at the same time, it's like meditation. There are some tools that really help. With this, there is a really interesting program called the Self-Investigation. They have it in Spanish, and they helped me a lot during the pandemic. It's focused for journalists. And there is a center in Prezi there that I use almost every day to help me because it's not easy. And okay, it's not just other jobs that you finish working and you forget and turn the key. It's not there, it's in there. And I can tell you that even here that I'm talking about the violence cases I've been reporting on, I haven't been sleeping well at all. So, but we can give you my contact. I'm happy to share some tools that have been helping, but we do need to think. We are human beings, above all.
I'd love to explore that first half of the statement as well about sort of the line, sort of how far do you go following a story. Sam, I know in Asia, and the Earth Journalism Network has uncovered all sorts of, our partners in the network, all sorts of stories. Sort of how far do you think? I mean, sort of, you publish a story, you follow up, sort of where do you see that line of sort of journalism?
Right. So, and another part of what he was saying in Spanish is the ultimate impact, right? And this is something that we struggle with. And he's talking about this Danish investment and basically a a dam project in Colombia and the ultimate impact of all this work that you invest in it, and then you see very little policy change. And this is actually reflected in the Covering the Planet report, where it seems like a measly number. Only 29% of journalists report having their stories or their journalism having a policy impact, but that's actually sizable. I think on one level
It's
that's
huge,
an
yeah,
incredibly
it's
significant number. Many journalists pass their whole careers, even investigative reporters, not having any policy impacts. But I think sometimes the donor community also gets a little too focused on having a direct policy impact after every type of story. I don't think that's necessarily, and this is tying into your point, Jeannie, I don't think having that tangible policy impact is always going to be the outcome of good reporting, whether it's collaborative reporting like that, which we do in the Asia-Pacific region, whether it's explanatory reporting, whether it's, there's the growing field of solutions work as well. I think there's a burgeoning understanding that impacts can be understood beyond new legislation or an indictment or wholesale constitutional reform, though those are great. And I think we have to be creative in how we untangle that. And so as journalists, when we're going down the line of saying, okay, why do I invest myself in this story? What is the ultimate intention? And I see this in the collaborations that we work with, and I have these conversations with a lot of reporters. I say, well, I mean, ultimately, some of those outputs and outcomes from your stories are a little more ephemeral. They are sometimes, they're difficult to unravel, but they can be things such as, well, conscientization of the population. People understand these concepts a little bit more. I mean, one of the other things about the Covering the Planet report is the notion of the public understanding climate concepts on a wider scale. That in and of itself, I think, to some degree is a victory. So speaking to both this gentleman's point and to that, I think we have to be creative in how we capture these impacts because they're not necessarily always going to be policy-based.
Completely agree with that. And
Yeah.
maybe one more question, and then we'll do our final round here. Yes? And if it's in Spanish, my colleagues are very adept. So I am less so. Is there a mic?
If you speak loud,
Speak loud, we'll
project.
project it back. It's been a long day.
Yeah, thanks all of you. I'm Ivor Stadolski, co-founder and director of Artists at Risk. So we work with artists who are at high risk from around the world. It's an NGO. We have over 300 hosting institutions hosting hundreds of artists. And we have a parallel program, a sister program called Ecologists at Risk. And I'm wondering whether you are aware of this kind of a structure for residencies for people who have experienced traumatic forms of risk or need a breather, rest and respite from the front line of, environmental journalism or other forms of, very harsh kind of risk-taking activities, and whether, you would like to connect us to them because we would love to partner. We don't want to be kind of in competition. So are you aware of such programs, and would you feel that would be beneficial to your work? It's kind of usually a minimum of 3 months, but it could be shorter in the case of environmental defenders. Maybe it needs to be shorter. It's usually in the region, so you don't fly to the other end of the planet to be able to, recover, which is, would make no sense environmentally. And it involves, full funded kind of time to just gather your thoughts and make the next step.
Anyone in our sector? I personally have.
Well,
Sam and
yeah,
then Carla?
just very briefly, I think that would be hugely beneficial, particularly in the freelancer community.
Yes, exactly.
We work with a lot of freelancers that are at the front lines of both what was mentioned, mental health burnout, as well as obviously physical health issues and financial, right? I mean, of course, being a freelancer is extremely risky financially. So I can say offhand, I could probably think of 30 freelancers that would benefit from such a program.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all agree.
I can add some. That would be wonderful. Like, and as Sam said, especially freelancer, because I'm staff, so like I had this direct support, and it's easier when you are full employed to have this. But with freelancers, there is some challenges and funding. But at the same time, I think we really need to speak about this in a broader way and bring it into newsrooms, because not all newsrooms are that supportive. because we finished a very tough story that we're overwhelmed, almost burning out, and what's next? We just start working on another heavy story without a break. And I can tell you that I have difficulties to stop. Like, no, but then I have to continue, like, and sometimes people say, no, you need to take it easy sometimes, because as environmental reporters, we feel a mission. It's like we somewhat try to save the world and need to help sources. So like the case I mentioned that the source was shot, was a hospital. I said, no, I can't take time off. I need to be reporting on this and follow his state. I kind of feel a bit responsible because through them I could tell a story, and now they are in hardship. So, but I think it would be really needed to broaden this conversation.
And I guess I just wanted to add something we also do at Internews and Together for Conservation is we study the information landscapes. And in the Amazon, we're finding out that they're becoming deserts, information deserts. Locally or regional outlets are not there. And why I'm making this point is that local journalists that are in the Amazon, even they have even more threats. They don't have where to publish their stories. And this is also something that is very frustrating because as we heard, I was in a panel in the morning, these journalists really are at risk for their lives and they want to have their stories out, and they don't get the attention from mainstream newspapers. And so, well, I think that's a very good idea of what you mentioned. And I think with Together for Conservation, we're trying to allocate resources to media outlets that are emerging. The media landscape for environmental journalists is growing, is emerging, but it's very precarious. So our hope is that we're building some support and community building to have better capacity to confront the challenges. No?
Building from what Sigrid just said, I'd love to spend our final few minutes, oh, I got a clock now at my face here, so talking a little bit about a call to action. I mean, we're in a room full of, we are all people that support journalists around the world doing some of the most difficult work. There's a lot of other support organizations in this room. What are your what are the best practices, call to action, sort of things that people should be thinking about if they're thinking of supporting environmental journalists, particularly working in such difficult environments? And just from the report itself, I know that you have some recommendations for donors, but just sort of, yeah, what's our...
I would say one of the key messages of the report is that environmental journalists need more unrestricted funding, more independence and freedom to report on topics that are actually relevant and fill an information gap for the audience they serve.
And long-term funding, right? Because these projects, nothing is short-term when it comes to these types of stories, yeah.
Yeah, and building on that, I think some of the other parts that emerge from covering the planet that are also quite salient is continual training, whether it be on security issues, and we've talked about security protocols and risk assessments of that nature, but also an understanding of the evolving media landscape in general. So the tools that are necessary to essentially make yourself present in the new journalistic landscape in terms of even things like learning how to do podcasts for individuals that aren't familiar with that technology, though it's not new now, it is in some places, or whether it's use of social media, in fact, utilization of generative AI in a healthy manner. So there's learning and training in traditional journalistic techniques, new techniques, practices, and also thematic knowledge building as well. We're talking about tropical ecosystems, so understanding the science behind a lot of the work that's done in these tropical ecosystems is time intensive, and so that's also required. So building on that, the training component is huge.
Sigrid, I just want to focus on, I was struck by your sort of finding alternative types of reporting or new emerging voices and things. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that as a recommendation.
I think besides what my friends have said or my colleagues have said, I think it's there's a need of network building, alliances among, for example, for such a biome like the Amazon, we need to have more transboundary work, collaborative work, which is very difficult because countries, have different borders. But we need to build a community of environmental reporters that can share information, that can share security, they can share sources to enhance their work, but also enhance their well-being, because I think it's building an alliance or collaborative work ensures that people share their problems, but also their opportunities. No, I think that's something we're trying to address.
Carla, and also if you, any of your research you'd like to do a shout out to your website, now's the time if there's any.
I think the key message here is that we are not superheroes, and I think we need to recognize our vulnerabilities and develop this awareness among outlets, and for this getting support for training, for mental health assistance, because we can only keep doing the work you do if we are healthy, because otherwise we will collapse, and then we can't be doing this. And talking about it. Other day, for example, I took part of a group, it's not focused on environment, it's the IJN Women, just for women, investigative journalists. And it was a great talk. So everyone just sharing how they were almost burning out and couldn't handle, and to see we're not alone. I think we need to knock down this image that we can't be fragile, we can't be vulnerable. We have to talk about it, and hearing other one, we are stronger. We learn with one another about the tools we're using, not compete, but really to do this alliance and for the well-being of everyone.
Completely agree with that, and I wanted to sort of say as a final thing, we at Internews, we encourage anyone who's working on environmental journalism to please look at our Earth Journalism Network and join. It's an open group of people that we'd love to have as many environmental journalists as possible access those resources. We do have a research coming out in a couple of weeks that we've been referring to that does look at 20 years of environmental journalism and some of the trends that Isabel's been talking about. I am so grateful to this group of people and to all of you for actually supporting the journalists, covering some of the most important issues facing our planet. So just want to thank you. It is incredibly dangerous, incredibly difficult, but so very important. And thank you all for staying to the last session of this amazing week. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you all. And I think we have to scoot. They have an event coming in here, right?